You, says Jesus, the peace I give is not as the world gives. And in a world of anxiety and conflict, we're all hungry for that peace that Jesus promises. As I was thinking about my sermon, I was walking around my neighborhood, and I looked up and I saw this hand hanging out a window. And it was just didn't look like it belonged. And it wasn't like the bottom of the window, it was like the top of the window. And I was like, am I gonna have to call 911? Is there something going on? And I eventually realized that it was just somebody in a top little kind of attic room of their house taking a smoke break. And that either their spouse or their landlord didn't want them to smoke inside. And I thought, yeah, we're all looking for a moment of peace in this world. I think about the disciples then in the story today, and they've all been through so much. They've endured the death of Jesus on the cross. They've seen him rise from the dead, and again, they've had this moment of peace. This last weekend, I was at a synod assembly, which is a really fancy way of saying that there's about 200 churches in the area, in the 9-county area, and we were electing a bishop. And along the way, there was one of the people who was one of the finalists to be for a bishop, and her name is Angela Zimmern, and she said something that really stood out to me in one of her kind of speeches, and she said that synod means we're on the way together. And then she said, what is the church but those of us on the way together going home? Again, what is the church but those of us on the way together going home? And this really then just kind of was really tender for me. And I was thinking a bit about this, and I then recalled kind of when I was a kid how much I enjoyed the walk home. Because all day long at school you have tests and quizzes, and you've got people you've got to impress or people you don't want to make fun of. You've got the whole academic and social kind of world that is school. And when you get home, then you've got homework and you've got activities and you've got other stuff. But there was that time when you got off school and you're walking home, and for just that little bit of the day, there was a sense of relief. There was that sense of peace, and you maybe got to be by yourself, maybe with a good friend or two, and you could let down your guard a little bit and be honest about, oh man, I didn't do that well on that test, or I really did well, and you're just sharing that with them, or there's some high or some low, and you kind of are just a little bit more vulnerable, a little bit more real, kind of just exhausted from the day. And I thought, again, what a beautiful image of the church, of this place and this space, kind of like we're walking home. I know that for many of you, your drive home is that chance to kind of unwind, or you find that with your kids, it's when you're picking them up to and fro and you're taking them home that you can have some of those really honest conversations. And again, this image of the church as the place where we're all kind of walking home, resting, seeking relief from the stress and worries of our labors. And again, that's what Jesus offers his disciples, and that's what Jesus offers us in the church. Last night there was a large number of youth that were here, kind of a welcome to the summer event, and the kids were playing and all, and I got to hear the parents kind of connecting, and out of some of their mouths, I can't believe I now have a high schooler, which is both a statement of sheer joy and sheer terror, right? How did this happen? But a chance again for people to come together. And I know in so many ways at St. Paul, people are able to come together and to be journeyers on the way home, to be at a moment where we're a bit more honest and a bit more vulnerable about who we are, and in that process to find real comfort and relief from each other. Or each week, this week included, when we begin our worship service and we begin with a moment of confession, a moment of acknowledging to God that we didn't live the last week with full love of our neighbor or with full love to God, that there were things that didn't go the way we wanted, and we hear that news of relief, that it's okay, that God still loves us in Jesus Christ, that indeed, because of Jesus' death and resurrection, our sins are forgiven. And so the church, in my mind, becomes this this space, this place, this community where we're walking together on the way home, walking with Jesus in this profound sense that it's going to be okay, this chance to just exhale in a weary and fast world. But that sense of peace isn't simply an inner peace. Again, Jesus actually comes to bring about peace between peoples. And this is what happened in the Pentecost story. There were people from all over the world, and yet they gather and they find their unity then in Jesus. It goes without saying that we live in a world that has all sorts of divisions. This week we all kind of got to sit back and have our popcorn and watch a billionaire breakup. That got ugly pretty fast. But it's a reminder again of just how tumultuous and how conflicted our world really is. Or 5 years ago, our nation paused, was shocked by the death of George Floyd, and then the ensuing really difficult conversations, what that unleashed in terms of our recognition of the challenges we have with racism in our country. It's clear again that we live in a world that has all sorts of divisions. I heard this last week, the people, when they look to their pastors, they're not looking to their pastors for who to vote for, but they're looking to pastors in the church to figure out how to deal with family members that vote differently than they do. Again, this is the world in which we live in, where there's all sorts of divisions. But again, God and Jesus Christ has come, and Pentecost is the beginning of this healing of the nations and this overcoming the burdens and the divisions that we have. Well, yesterday, when I went to the Synod Assembly to vote, I confess to you that I skipped some of it, but I wanted to show up for the last and final vote. And I thought I would sneak in, and so I saw an open seat, and so I kind of ducked in the back and sat down. And I looked over, and 3 seats to my right was, again, Pastor Zim and Angela, who was one of the 2 finalists. And over to my left, by about 4 seats, was Steve Herr, the other finalist. And I said, wow, I did not pick an inconspicuous spot here, like right in the middle. And then and this voting took it took forever. So anyway, they're finally ready to announce the results. And the way they did it, actually, Angela thought that she had won. And she kind of gasped in surprise. And then they quickly said, no, the bishop was Steve Herr. Oh. And it was like a shock for everybody. But the first person to stand up and start congratulating and applauding for Steve was Angela. She stood up right away and started applauding as soon as she heard that Steve Herr was bishop. And Steve Herr made a beeline right for her. And so then I suddenly found myself in the fetal position trying to avoid them. And I looked up and they were hugging each other. And the election for a bishop in our synod lasts at least 6 months. You have all these interviews, you have to do all this stuff, and people grill you and question you, tell you what you need to do. It's just your family's life is kind of put on hold as you don't know if you're going to become the bishop. And so here they were, and there was both sorrow and excitement, but fundamentally they were able to embrace as a brother and sister in Christ, as 2 people journeying together on the way home. And I realized that in a world of massive problems, I haven't even gotten to the international conflicts and all of the war that is in our world, that this can just seem like a little drop in the ocean of a sea of conflict. But I think as Christians, again, last week Jesus called us to bear witness, and there is a way in which we're called to celebrate and to live into the reconciliation that God has, and to rejoice whenever we see it happening. My peace I give you peace not as the world gives you. And that peace comes to us both as relief, that moment of exhale, but also reconciliation, that moment of inhaling and opening up our hearts to God's work in our lives. And I think so far, I think what I've said is fair and true, and kind of churchy as well, that the church can be this space where we, again, receive relief and have our hearts open for reconciliation, where we breathe in and breathe out the peace of Christ as we're Spirit-led. But the challenge, the rub, is that there are many people in this world who hunger for the peace of Christ, but they're not knocking down our doors. Again, there are So many people in your lives who are hungering for that peace of Christ in their own hearts or in relationships or indeed in the broader world, but they're not beating down our door. And sometimes that's because they can't afford the time within their schedule. More and more, that's just because people don't know what the church is. They're not invited. They don't have any friends in church. But for other people, it's because they've been hurt by the church, or they view that the church is part of the problem, that we're part of the cause of a lot of the lack of peace and division in our culture. Again, there are plenty of people who are hungry for that peace of Christ, but they're not barging down the doors to get in. And so I think the church, again, needs Pentecost, because on Pentecost, the Spirit moves the church out into the world. It moves the church out of a comfortable inner peace and pushes it, calls it to spread that message of peace and that presence and reconciliation of Jesus out into this hurting world. There was a bit of a Pentecost moment this week at St. Paul, and that was on Thursday night. The Christian Early Learning Center had an end-of-the-year kind of festival, and they had a bounce house. And it was really fun to see these little kids who were, they were red in the cheek, their hair is kind of matted down against their forehead in sweat, and their moms and dads like, "Do you want water? Do you want a break?" No. They're just going one more round in the big bounce house, and they were so happy. And that in itself would have just been really beautiful to see all these children and families kind of outside in our sacred grounds, just kind of rejoicing with each other. But a number of the parents came up to me, and they said to me, "Is Mr. Matt doing okay?" Let me explain. Matt Good is our sexton at our church, and on Thursday morning he fell. Ended up being hospitalized, needed multiple surgeries. He's doing okay. He will be okay, but he's definitely, it was a rough couple of days for him. And this meant that the chapel service of the kids had to be delayed a little bit. And if there's one thing kids know, it's when their schedule is changed. So all the kids went home. They all told their parents the chapel had been changed because Mr. Matt had fallen off a ladder. And so these parents, they didn't even call him Matt, they called him Mr. Matt. They said, "Is Mr. Matt doing okay?" And I thought that was so beautiful that the circle of care extends out well beyond who comes on a Sunday morning, but to all of these families in the CELC and the way that they feel connected, deeply connected. Their kids are here every day to the ministry and space that's here. But as I was out there then, I hadn't really spent much time in the sacred garden grounds at night, but I walked over, and in the community garden there were some people there that were picking peas, their first vegetables in their garden plots, and they were so thankful for the community garden there. And then a couple of people started walking by with their dogs, and they clearly had this part of their nightly rhythm to kind of see each other here. And it struck me that here are these people in the community. I don't even know their names. I don't even know their faces. And they're coming to St. Paul almost every day to get that peace that they can't find in other places. Again, every day we have people who are coming here to our sacred grounds, and they're finding that peace that they're so hungry for. Again, the church is called to push itself out and to follow the Spirit. When Angela said, though, that the church is those of us on the way together going home, what she was really talking about was our eternal home. And I was thinking then about this, such a beautiful metaphor for the church, that we're all sort of on this journey together, finally all going home to the place of reunion, to the place where heaven and earth meet, and we're back in the garden. And at the close of the night, I looked over, and there was a dad and a daughter in the prayer labyrinth. And you could tell that this young girl had had a lot of fun and was right about to crash out. You can tell, right? She was just that shy of crashing out. And the dad, I think, had taken her over to the sacred grounds to kind of calm her down a little bit from the fun of the bounce house. And he said, "Do you want me to hold you?" And she said, "Yes." And he had her in his arms in our prayer labyrinth. And it was such this beautiful image of two people, probably both of whom were ready to crash out, holding on to each other in this sacred space of prayer. But I think also that deep longing that I think all of us have to finally be reunited with God and to feel that embrace. Pentecost is, yes, the birth of the church. It's the birth of this community where we're on this road together. And we're going home, and some days that feels like relief, and other days that is a reconciliation, and other days that's finally a push out into the world, finally in the hopes that one day we'll all be reunited back in the garden. Thanks be to God.